So, welcome to our interview series on technology impact assessment, otherwise known as TIA. My name is Katina Michael. I'm a visiting scientist at Arizona State University and also a fellow at the Social Cyber Institute in Australia. This interview is part of the Australia-India Joint Impact Assessment of Critical Technologies for Peace and Stability project, funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and also the counterpart in India. And it's been ongoing since November 2024. And so we've had a series of webinars and roundtables to date. And in this series, we are focusing on specifically technology impact assessment with respect to peace and stability. And today it gives me great pleasure to welcome Krishna Ravi Srinivas, who's an adjunct professor at Nalsa University of Law in Hyderabad, a consultant with research and innovation systems in developing countries, and managing editor of a journal titled Asian Biotechnology and Development Review, affiliated also with the STEEP program at RIS. We might begin by asking you to update us. This is an older bio, perhaps, but let us know currently your affiliations, Ravi.
So basically, right now I'm affiliated with Nalsar University of Law as adjunct professor of law, and I'm also affiliated with Center for Responsible AI at IIT Madras, Chennai.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So my RI's affiliation is almost coming to an end. So the current affiliation with Nalsar is the fine.
Yes, very good. And your disciplinary background, is it law alone?
No, my disciplinary background is social science and law because I did my PhD from National Law School of University of Law on agricultural biodiversity and IPRs, intellectual property rights.
Fantastic. And you've brought those two fields together in your research and your
Yeah,
practice.
yeah.
And tell us about the journal you've been editing. Interesting, Asian Biotechnology and Development Review.
No, Asian Biotechnology Development Review is now in its 27th year. It is a Scopus indexed peer-reviewed international journal. Issues related to IPRs, biotechnology, health, and also on various issues relating to developing countries and biotechnology, in the sense that we publish whole variety of articles on various dimensions and aspects of biotechnology, particularly agricultural biotechnology, policy, some aspects relating to access to biotechnology products, health biotechnology, and related themes. I'm
Wonderful.
also part of the global, technology assessment network, global TA network, which has come up with two volumes on global technology assessment. And then we had a major conference earlier this month at Vienna on as part of the global TA network.
And were you attending that conference, Ravi?
No, I didn't attend because I had another project meeting at UNESCO Paris. So, but then I gave a lecture, a presentation online on that conference.
And can
I
you
can
tell
share
us,
the agenda and other things with you.
yes, what kind of presentation was it on the topic of biotechnology or
No, it was not.
agriculture?
It was more on emerging issues in technology assessment from Asia perspective, where I argued that Asia Pacific is actually doing a lot of work on very innovative things on emerging technologies, particularly India and China. So, how do we look at the technology assessment in terms of emerging technologies like AI, synthetic biology, genome editing, and all? And what are the global implications of that in for the TA as such? We match technology assessment with the emerging needs in socio-economic development of technologies. For example, AI. And for example, how do we assess what synthetic biology can contribute to emerging economies in the world, particularly in Asia Pacific?
When you look at emerging technologies in your lexicon and definition, do you have a standard set in India that you call these are the critical emerging technologies, or you have defined your own over time with your research groups?
No, it varies both ways because the whole idea of critical and strategic emerging technologies, or what people call as CSET, again is very broad because the quad looks at CSET in terms of four or five technologies, whereas broadly speaking emerging technologies also include life sciences, also includes couple of strategic technologies, particularly From the Quad perspective, they look at more from semiconductors, AI, and then defense-oriented strategic technologies. But then the broader emerging science technologies also include technologies like synthetic biology, genome editing, and then blockchain, like that. So it varies from the institutional perspective because Quad is focused more on security and then collaboration among the Quad countries on emerging critical technologies, whereas for the academic perspective, the strategic technologies are not that much important. That we are more focused on emerging technologies from a socio-economic development perspective.
With regards to technology impact assessment, as a term, can you tell us about your involvement over time in this area or in peripheral areas?
No, technology impact assessment and then technology assessment, there's a huge overlap. But then technology impact assessment is much more very recent term. So still, I mean, one sense both are the same, but in another sense both are somewhat different because impact assessment is more focused on what exactly the impact the technology is going to create in a given period or in a given context. So that is more contextual, whereas TA is much more broader.
And in your work, in the last three
My work is
decades,
focused more on TA, more focused on TA than on TAE.
can you tell us about it? How you've been
Yes,
engaged in
I'm that.
TA?
I have written a couple of articles on technology assessment of biotechnology and then on the technology assessment in India. On AI, I am trying to work on a couple of things, but then we not yet crystallized. Similarly, on synthetic biology, I have been working with OECD, Synthetic Biology Futures Group. So some part of that covers technology assessment in SynBio, which we covered in the volume, but then more needs to be done. More needs to be done on that.
Perhaps, Ravi, I could say you're one of the most prolific writers in India on this topic.
Not
With
exactly, I wouldn't claim I'm so prolific, but I need to
you're
do more
engaged.
work.
Yes,
Of course, all of us need to publish and do a lot of work because there are a lot of new emerging things and challenges in our work. You know that.
yes.
Particularly, ASU has been the hotbed of a lot of debate and discussions and literature emanates from ASU in these areas.
Yes, particularly since the 1990s, in the late 1990s, through human genome in
Yeah,
particular.
yeah.
My school actually was a research group at the time
Yeah,
and
yeah, I
was
know that.
heavily
I know that.
involved.
People like
Yes,
Gary Marchand, Eric
yes,
Fisher, and then
yes.
I worked for Eric Fisher in some of the projects on responsible search and innovation.
Wonderful, Ravi, wonderful. And you mentioned for us a number of technologies that you've covered with regards to technology assessment. Can you tell us if this is different? Do you think the list of critical emerging technologies in countries under global development sort of regimes is different to those, say, of Five Eyes nations, for example?
No, for example, I would say now there's a whole debate happening around semiconductors. That is because for countries like India, Korea, semiconductor is a very key technology. But if you go down further, many countries do not have anything on semiconductors. They are almost 100% import dependent on semiconductors. So the question of criticality and strategically importance varies among countries. And then there are countries like Singapore and Malaysia, then which are highly dependent on semiconductor because they are also having their own semiconductor industry, but that is largely import driven or the capacities is from abroad. Whereas India is trying to develop homegrown indigenous capacity in semiconductors because we don't want to be so dependent on China particularly. But of course, we are heavily reliant on Taiwan now. So countries try to forge cross-country collaboration with USA, with Taiwan, and then whoever is willing to offer technology depending upon the need. Whereas for many countries in Asia Pacific or for that matter in Latin America or Africa, it will be a very costly proposition to get into manufacture of semiconductors even for their own use because market or the economy itself is not huge enough to absorb such huge investment vis-a-vis the industrial needs as such. So it is here I think technology impact assessment can help countries to guide as to where the investment or what sort of technologies they would need. particularly in semiconductor or in blockchain or in any other technology. Because the problem is many countries are not what I would say that don't have the capacity to invest too much into these technologies. They need to prioritize. They need to identify niche areas where they can prioritize and then still benefit, while they can still need to import a lot of technology from other countries.
Yes, India being now one of the largest powers in terms of population count, at least. The
Yes.
emphasis is on the market in India there to
More,
do
more
business
on
with
more on that
India.
emphasis now is on self-reliance.
Very true. The Global to Local campaign, I do
Yeah,
recall from 2020, where there was a big push to consider investing in local organizations and startups in India. It is booming. The sector is booming in India. We
yeah,
can
yeah.
say
It is.
that.
Yeah.
We can say that. And tell me, do you see, Ravi, that each country has its own sort of public interest technology, its own emphasis on particular technologies that they see as enablers for the prosperity of their country? Or do you see there being a common base, perhaps, uh, for those that wish to move quickly in towards industrialization, for instance?
I think it works both ways. For example, if you look at it, the whole idea of bioeconomy, but then the Indian perspective on bioeconomy is somewhat more focused on finding substitutes for the heavy oil dependent or the fossil fuel dependent bioeconomy paradigm. So we are shifting more towards bioethanol, and then we are focusing more on technologies like synthetic biology or bioengineering or other combinations of technologies that will help us to largely utilize our agricultural residues or the residues which come from agriculture, and also convert a significant amount of grains to bioethanol synthetic fuels. But this may not be the priority for Australia. This need not be the priority for Japan, although US is trying to do it in its own limited way. So, whereas Brazil has been a major successful example of converting sugarcane into bioethanol, but that may not work everywhere. There are a lot of technological issues. I mean, economies of scale and then cost benefit analysis. So, Indian program on Bio 3 or bioeconomy or Bio 3 economy, which the government is trying to push, consists of many things where we want to build upon their traditional strength in biotechnology, particularly the biotechnology where you focus on one hand on health, on the other hand on industrial biotechnology, and then try to move towards the next generation biofuels where you derive a lot of valorization through application of bioengineering or synthetic biology or engineering biology, but also trying to ensure that the balance between food security as well as moving towards synthetic biofuels is taken care of, in the sense that you can't compromise one for the other. So that is one thing. Second thing, which is also equally important, is that we need to move towards bioplastics, bio based industrialization in some sectors so that we don't depend upon fossil fuels to a great extent for everything. But this may not be the priority for every country, as I said. And then it is where the technology assessment initiatives can really help. But unfortunately, you do not see a lot of TA work happening in this area.
I think you raised some fantastic points here, particularly in how the emphasis, for example, in imports and exports, depending on where we're making things, uh,
Yeah,
could cause some geopolitical shifts. And from that, I mean the over-reliance on imports, for instance, and the generation of more exports from perhaps Australia and India as an example. I do think it's very healthy that there is an emphasis on the bioeconomy. I think for long-term stability, and our grant is on peace and stability. People often don't talk so much about the stability, but I think you're talking about sustainability and stability. Um, Tell me about how you view uh, technologies for impact assessment with respect to converging technologies and the fact that technology is not it's not so easily sorted as it once was. We had semiconductor, it was its own thing. We had this, it was its own thing. Calculators in another place, different kinds of devices that were almost at the component level singular. But now we have this enmeshing, this convergence occurring between technologies that are coming together in recombinations, in hybrid forms to offer a new offering. How do you see technology impact assessment then? How do you do it with regard to the definition
It
of what
is,
is a technology?
it is actually a major challenge for the traditional technology assessment as well as for technology impact assessment. I'll give you one example. I've been trying to do some, I'm working on two converging things which are very fascinating, at the same time very challenging to understand. That is the interface between synthetic biology and artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
See, today, both technologies are very hot. A lot of potential, lot of things are happening. But to understand where exactly the implications of this is very hazy. For example, synthetic biology has reached a stage, now today we can more or less manipulate, create synthetic organisms. And with AI, we can do a whole lot of things. But the trick or the crux of the thing is that the potential for dual use is very imminent. Still, we are very clueless as to how do we manage that dual use aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Second aspect, which is again very becoming very important, is that there are a lot of things which are technically feasible, maybe technically feasible in the laboratories or at the conceptual level. But then the challenge here would be how will you use AI and synthetic biology in combination, say to derive vaccines or to derive new molecules or to derive new drugs. At the same time, will you ensure that this combination of AI and synthetic biology does not run amok in one sense or does not reach a dead end, because technically the problem is many things which are technically feasible at the lab level may not be able to scale up or may not be able to meet the regulatory requirements, or there could be some unforeseen issues when it comes to regulatory affairs. For example, we are not yet fully equipped enough to understand some of the developments implications even in the short term. So
Mm.
this convergence is a major problem there. And I see one thing which is very important is that with AI, we should be able to open up lot of pathways, simulate lot of things without doing any in the sense that in lab, lot of things can be computer simulations can give us lot of pathways. But then
Yes.
how to pick the best from that? How do we assess the various combinations and permutations? We are not very sure. So the future opening up of this convergence is something which I am not very confident of, assessing or predicting in one sense. But then we need to do lot of put our brains together to even to understand some of the things. And one more thing which is also becoming very clear is that we should not end up exaggerating lot of things when in the initial stage itself, in the sense that, for example, lot of things were said that AI is going to make a huge development in science. Yes, but then we are also seeing that some of the things, predictions, or some of the things which AI may do may not be realizable in practice, because
Yes.
there could be there could be a lot of wrong and misleading directions which may either end up as dead ends or which may not fructify as very fruitful ones. So this convergence, I think, we need to be very cautious. We need to explore all the options.
Mm-hmm.
But do we have the methodology in technology assessment or technology impact assessment to forewarn us or to tell us which are the real right path to choose? I'm not very sure.
As you say, with the complexity growing and the meshed capabilities now between technologies coming together and offering new kinds of paths forward, we can only predict what we can imagine, but we can get it wrong in these technology impact assessments. But I like the word of scenario planning that you mentioned a moment ago, and the fact that scenarios can help us to disclose the potential paths,
Yeah,
but we
yeah,
can't be
they
sure.
can, they can. In
Yes.
fact, it is here some of the critical work on AI. particularly done by Arvind Kapoor and Arvind Narayan and Shayesh Kapoor in Stanford. I think they're
Mm-hmm.
in Stanford or Princeton, I don't know, but I think they're in Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
They have been doing a lot of work on critical AI where they say that how do we look AI as a normal technology, and then how do we assess both the hype as well as the no the counter narrative on AI. So I think they have a very fantastic paper which talks of AI as a normal technology, which I think will be very helpful for people in TA to come to an understanding as to how do we evaluate the impact of AI in the long run,
Yes.
because they or the typical AI people who are looking at various aspects of AI. So they are not the typical TA people, but when they put AI as a normal technology, they say, look, yes, it is going to have a major impact, but then don't get into this hype and don't get misled by hype. At the same time, take a very pragmatic view. Look at what is going to happen. Look what has happened in the past when so much of hype was built upon various things. For example, we all know for the past 20 years or so, a lot of work has been going on regenerative stem cells.
Mm-hmm.
And then only right now we are seeing that some of them is coming to effect. Whereas lot of investment went, lot of things were happening that if you look at for the past 15, 20 years, regenerative medicine, stem cells were hyped. But then nothing much happened in the sense that many of the predictions didn't come through at all. Now we are seeing certain things are happening. Regenerative medicine is now taking, deep, but it is going in a specific direction.
Yes.
So it has taken at least 10, 15 years for us to realize that things may work, but in some direction, but may not work as predicted earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then synthetic biology also, now engineering biology, a lot of things are now happening. Bottom up engineering biology is taking shape, and then combination of AI and synbio is also taking shape. But still, we may have to wait at least 5, 6 years to see something to fructify or something to come into the shape we want to. So I think technology assessment will have to take first some of the hype with a pinch of salt and then see where are we moving to. I think my second point, which I think all of us will also know, but we need to put it much more on concrete terms, is that there are certain developments which we couldn't foresee. For example, ChatGPT, nobody foresaw that. DeepSeek was nowhere in the horizon when so much hype was happening. And then today we have no idea as to from where the next breakthrough will come or from where the next failure will come. Both are very very unpredictable these days. And then when Chinese say that we have couple of things deep seeks lined up, we need to take that with a pinch of salt. But then the problem is that we really do not know, for the simple reason that whether the DeepSeeks will replace Chat GPTs, or will there be a technical breakthrough in terms of AI in the next few years? We have no idea. But all we can say is that things are happening at a rapid pace when a lot of things are happening parallelly. Whether it is no in terms of agentic AI, or whether in terms of AI based certain developments across sectors. But where do we fit in TI in all these things is a big question.
Mm-hmm.
For the simple reason, TI in AI is very underdeveloped. TI in life sciences, particularly SynBio, is more like a work in progress. It is still not come to that maturity level. Again, TA in many of the emerging technologies, we really have to do a state of the art as to what is exactly is happening, who is doing what. We are not very sure of that. So it is here, I think, institutions like ASU, Social Cyber Institute can put together the best brains, the best methodologies, and then the best foresight analysis, and then see, okay, where do we stand? Maybe it's also time to do a sort of Delphi thing analysis, foresight analysis, and also to do some sort of predictive analysis. Okay, what is the potential of some of the things to happen the near term horizon, 3 year, 4 year, 2 year, where the money goes, what the patents are about, and then what the analysis are going to be about. So I think lot of uncertainties are there, but we need to be very cautious, or one I would say that cautiously optimistic, rather than
Yes.
things getting hyped, rather than get away with the hype.
Ravi, you mentioned the term dual use technologies. You also alluded to perhaps a double-edged sword. It could go either way, or
Yeah,
but
yeah.
usually it's somewhere down the middle. It's neither extreme. But what do you believe the mission or the role of a technology assessment is? What is it? Why do we conduct them?
There are two things I think we need to bear in mind. One, when TA was initially started in 1970s, it came up in an environment, where there was a sort of whole lot of techno pessimism, more fuel on account of the limits to growth, uncontrolled pollution, then a lot of people getting fearful about what the technological revolution will lead to. Today we are not in that environment. Today the environment is much more positive. In fact, today the outlook on technology is much more positive despite so many worries, so many other things. So today's context, the role of TA should be to play as a pragmatic advisor. I would put that as a advisor with a sense of
Hmm.
pragmatism built in. At the same time, we should look what TA can is that TA should help us to understand what others are not able to, in the sense that where venture capital based hype, or the business journalism based hype, or the typical academic work which sees lot of new things happening but not able to give a whole picture. So I think here it is where TA can do a lot of things, in the sense that it can be something that can put together bits and pieces, or it could be something that could assemble a whole lot of Lego pieces, or whole lot of things which are happening here and there. At the same time, TA has got its own methodology. We know what we have been doing for the past 30, 40 years in terms of TA methodologies. And then there are a lot of things which TA can contribute. For example, constructive technology assessment, participatory technology assessment. Some of these things can be merged with public engagement tools. Some of these things can be merged with quick, rapid public opinion surveys, or Delphi cycle, or Delphi analysis. And also, we can do a lot of things like today, for example, using tools like Kobo, I can get 1,000, 3,000, 4,000 questionnaires quickly analyzed, come up with, matching patterns, which was not earlier possible, or earlier
Yes.
it possible took long time. Today, I can talk to 1,000 experts across the globe on a specific team using a Kobo, and then get within 6 hours an analysis done, a analysis which will tell me of the 1,000 experts I have surveyed, 2000 or 500 or 700, where they see the pattern emerging, where the divergence happening. So I think we need to update our tools on real-time analysis, using Cobos, using real-time questionnaires, and also supplement them with qualitative analysis. And I think in terms of methodology, we need to improve a lot. And maybe we need to develop new methodologies for the emerging new technologies, where we need to be running with the technologies rather than trying to reflect upon or reflect back upon.
Yes, the great Daniel Sarowitz at CISPO in Washington, D.C. at ASU used to talk about the need for new tools for science and science tech policy.
Yeah, yes.
We needed to discover these, and you've mentioned quite a few here. In fact, I'm surprised at the scale you're describing in the collection of data by experts at the thousand level that rapidly, to be able to gather that data and then to analyze it within 6 hours. That's very quick, if I may say, Ravi. But I'm sure you have done this process many times, and you know where to go, how to find the experts. Um, I think it's probably a good time to talk about where we would inject technology impact assessment In the life cycle of a technology, where do we do it, Ravi? If there is a problem, do we do it at the beginning of conception of a new technology? Do we do it when the government tells us, this is a critical emerging tech, quick, we've got to start studying it more carefully? When do we apply technology impact assessment in life cycles?
Uh, there are two things. One, often TAI is user driven, the sense that some agency or some government department or some industry association wants to get a TAI done, it can be done. But then at what level of technology it is there, and then what level of technology readiness level the technology is available seems to be taken. Because if you look at it, the earlier TA, particularly the earlier reports on TA, which they came up from Office of Technology Assessment and then a whole lot of parliamentary technology assessment, were very qualitative, very descriptive, very analytical in nature.
Mm,
But today, that is not sufficient. Today, you need to really bring in a whole lot of other information. For example, to give, if I am going to talk of technology impact assessment of an emerging technology, and then my government or a specific government is worried about the strategic aspect, maybe another government is more worried about the economic aspect, whereas the third government may be worried about as to how do I do that in a globally competitive way that my countries does not fall behind. So the technology impact assessment's objective may also vary. For example, if I say if I have to do a TAA for India where India says like fine, I am lagging behind in this critical technology, so how can TAA help me to identify the gaps where I need to compete better, where I need to build capacity, where I need to put more money, where I need to bring in
mhm,
experts, where I need to build institutions, where I need to build regulatory capacity, then TAA can be oriented towards that as whereas in a country or in an industry where the industry itself says, look, we really want to get your insights on what could be the short term and long term, medium term implications of TIA for the technology in terms of regulation, or put it other way, what sort of regulatory incentivization governance frameworks we would need for this technology to be accepted and flourish. For example, genome editing, and then, for example, some of the health technologies, the major thing could be acceptability, could be a criteria, public acceptance, the way public wants to perceive it could be an issue, where TAA can focus on that specific aspect, build upon something, and then integrate that as a part of larger technological impact assessment, and then say, look, this technology in the short, medium, long term can deliver this. But then there are certain uncertainties about this long term predictions which we may not be able to make true. For the simple way, the technology may develop further in a quicker way than what we anticipate.
mhm,
But if you really want to look at governance aspect of this is the thing where we need to focus on, like what is the gap in the understanding of technology, where there are issues in the technology itself that are unresolved, relating to safety, relating to clinical parameters, relating to the way the technology can be upscaled and then put to run through clinical trials. So TIA, I think today has to do functions. One, it has to do a very niche, user defined, user driven way, and then the larger objective of technology impact assessment. Both to me are complementary. We need not always think in terms of larger TIA where we write 100-page report or 200-page report and then come up with something. Rather, we can
yes.
focus upon specific needs, specific user driven
Hmm.
assessments, and then specific user driven and context. But academic institutions like ASU, for example, can take up an interface between AI and synthetic biology and then try to do a good job or a fantastic job because they have the capacity, whether an industry or a government wants them to do it. So that is where I think our focus should be, irrespective of what the governments, irrespective of what the industry wants. We should pick up some areas and then try to do some TAA in that.
Fascinating. We've been looking into with the group whether technology impact assessments take on a particular pro forma, but we don't really espouse to that approach where okay, a typical TIA has these segments in them. Of course, they have some baseline data that they always include, including a description perhaps of the emerging technology, where it's at in development, and other things like who are the stakeholders engaged with this technology and what are its potential applications and so forth. What are the impacts? But as you say, a sponsor or a user must be or will be driving the intent, uh, and that we are to respond to that intent based on the needs of the sponsor or the user. Tell us from your experience in all the different application areas you've analyzed and assessed. What are the typical things that you see in a technology impact assessment? And if you didn't see it there, you'd be concerned something was missing.
Often you we miss or what often one misses here is that our ways of looking at TA today are based on the earlier methodologies. So as I said,
Yes.
we need new methodologies now. In fact, the volume itself, we have highlighted some of these issues, particularly when it comes to biotechnology and synthetic biology, where we have pointed out that we don't have robust methodologies for them. And the second thing, which I think TA also, for TA, both TA, also needs to now look into is that while on one hand we are seeing a lot of convergence, lot of technologies coming together, it is also true that some of the technologies which are going to play a major role in the future may be doing many great things as a standalone technology. For example, genome editing. Genome editing as a standalone technology itself can do so many things, irrespective of convergence. And then, so the convergence, when it happens, it is something which we may not be able to easily really predict. But for standalone technologies, TA, we will be able to predict in a much more better way because we have some good experience, and that is something which we can handle without much difficulty. On the other hand, my own understanding or my own experience is that often we miss the direction in which the technology will go.
Mm-hmm.
To give an example, synthetic biology has been in the offing for the past decade or even 15 years because if one goes back, some of the discussions about synthetic biology started way back in early 2000, around 2004, 2005, around that time. Then 2010, 2015, there were a lot of projects in the Europe and all where they were talking about synthetic yeast and all. But after 2021, the focus shifted more towards engineering biology, bioreactors, biofoundries. But the biofoundry concept, which has taken or which has come into effect or which has become more popular in the last 3 4 years, was not something that was envisaged before.
Yes.
Earlier, it was seen more like a tinkering with genes, bottom up approach and all. Okay, but then biofoundry takes you to a totally new paradigm
Mm-hmm.
where biofoundry is possible to do large scale development of drugs, vaccines, specialty chemicals, and all. So this idea of biofoundry itself is not even a decade old, but then, as far as I know, this was never predicted or not even foreseen in many of the things in synthetic biology. Because our idea of synthetic biology at that time was okay, we have lab, we have people tinkering with genomes, we have people trying to synthesize genomes, we are trying to do things with develop new proteins and then try to bring them together rather than looking at this at all. Whereas biofoundry has its roots in industrial biotechnology, not in synthetic biology. Or if it go further, its roots in typical chemical engineering as much as it pertains to drug development, large scale chemical development. So the idea is that biofoundry is a offshoot of synthetic biology, but then it builds upon synthetic biology in a much more unanticipated way than what we expected.
Yes, I've seen some
Same
examples
thing is
of
also the true with synthetic biology for plants.
plants. Yes.
Yeah, because earlier the idea of synthetic biology was not confined to developing novel plants, but today we are talking of developing novel plants through synthetic biology. So,
Yes.
so the idea of synthetic biology, what we didn't anticipate as is happening the last 3 4 years because of technical things have been possible now.
That's right. Even 7 years ago, I do remember a couple of talks, some of them by biohackers actually, that were hanging around citizen-led
Yeah,
biofoundries
yeah.
and really tampering and experimenting with a great deal of different things, talking about them publicly and seeing how far they could go because regulation was not enforcing them to be unable to experiment in these biofoundries. So very, very powerful technology now, even in the hands of citizens who could be part-time chemists and then experimenting with their own ideas. Um, you mentioned a great deal of change in methodologies. You've discussed with us main criteria. Um, Tell us, because you've alluded to this a number of times, but to you, who are the stakeholders?
No, let me make it very clear. To be frank, in India, there is no TA as such. In the
Uh-huh.
sense that there is no technology assessment that is happening
Yes.
because there is no single agency which does it. But whatever is happening in terms of TA in the as we have described in the book is something that happens on a totally different scale.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, today TIA needs to first identify its potential clients
Yes.
rather than no remaining looking at states, looking at specific funding agencies. It needs to carve out its own niche of people who would ask for TA. It could be industry, it could be from different what you would call as cities or the zones where they want to promote certain technologies. It could be from industry bodies, it could be from anyone. So
Mm-hmm.
today I think TIA need both TIA as well as TA needs to think beyond the state-led technology assessment paradigm or the state-led need for technology assessment. The need should be felt by other users. For that, we need to talk to them. For example, we need to talk to people in different industries, in different sectors. To give an example, the traditional TAI in health, we need to identify who are the people who would be interested in it. It could be venture capitalists who want to put in money, millions and dollars of money, but want to get a better feel of the technology, get it assessed
Mm.
in terms of its impact, and then see where they can put the money in, or at least caution them like this is where it is going to be a little tricky, don't play around. It could be from the states, it could be from industry associations, it could be from other stakeholders like consumer groups, consumers, it could be from anyone else. And it is also important that today we need to look at specific groups like patients because patients are also now getting actively involved in drug development, promoting various therapies and all. It is happening everywhere, not just for rare diseases, but even for other ways. So that also we need to look into. So we need to identify the funding agencies, the venture capitalists, the different states, nation governments, funding agencies of different public-private partnerships, UN agencies, and others who will be interested in TA. We need to go and talk to them. Particularly in health sector, this is very important because health technology assessment has taken a great leap in the last decade. Earlier, it was part of just TA, but in the last decade, HTA has taken a great leap in many countries. Partially because it was realized that when there are multiple options available for a therapy or for anything, you need to do some assessment in terms of economic impact assessment. Whether therapy A is better for therapy than therapy B for cancer treatment. When the public is demanding no subsidies for cancer treatment or government is going to offer it, you need to do some cost benefit analysis of which part of that is technology assessment. So health technology assessment today has expanded to medical devices, diagnostic kits, and everything. That again came because there was a need for health technology assessment, which came on account of the need to assess the various therapies. Like that, we need to find out where the area is growing, where there's a demand, and then how do we go about it.
So, Ravi, I'm just going to restate something important here for our listeners as well. We're saying technology assessment or technology impact assessment has not taken root in India. However, there are related assessments that have been requested by government to certain particular groups to be done of emerging technologies. Have I summarized that correct, that answer?
Now, the summarization here is twofold. One, technology assessment is not happening much, is not happening in India,
Yes.
except health technology assessment, which has taken roots in
Yes.
India.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Second point is, in the last decade, globally, health technology assessment has taken deep roots across countries.
Yes.
Starting from UK, now we find many countries in Asia doing health technology assessment. There are at least two or three internal journals. And then
Yes.
India also, health technology assessment, there's an agency which does it on a very regular basis.
Yes.
Why this has happened is the reason I said, when there are multiple options available in terms of therapies, and then
Yes.
the governments have to assess their economic impact and then prefer one when you offer it through the public health services. For example, the NICE in UK, they started with that, and then that slowly became, from the mere economic perspective, health technology assessment took shape into a thing that went beyond therapies. It
Hmm.
went into diagnostic devices, medical devices, and then other things like that led to health.
Yes, and I also hear you that uh, patients, the end user of these TAs,
Yeah,
need to be embedded and engaged. We need to talk to them
yeah,
uh,
yeah. We need,
directly to incorporate their views.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because they also have, they're also stakeholders. They also see, why I'm saying is that if you look in deeply into the rare disease innovation, much of the disease and rare disease drug innovation was also driven by patients groups which funded their own, or which forced the government to look, we need to give some incentives because the commercial firms won't come for it. That is why FDA came up with some incentive schemes for developing drugs for rare diseases. And then some of the rare diseases, patients themselves, organized as groups, as pressure groups, got into some funding programs, funded some drugs, and then they are active on that. Now, technology assessment or technology impact assessment, if we talk to them, it will be mutually beneficial. The way they have engaged with technology, the way they have tried to promote innovation, will give us an idea that innovation can be from bottom up, can be user driven, can also be something which, where we did not see, but it is there. The need is there, demand is there, but it is not something that was not part of the regular, typical government thinking or the thinking of the private
Yes,
sector.
yes, yes,
So,
yes,
so then, if I were to do a technology impact assessment of a emerging technology or a therapy for a patient group, when I talk to them or when I tell them, look, these are the multiple options that are available, and then our assessment tells you that, then they can give from the user's perspective as to how correct my evaluation is or how correct my understanding is.
yes.
Because there are always trade offs.
Yes, and I think you're calling for transparency as well,
Yeah.
so that more users can become aware. We can raise the literacy level around an emerging technology that might affect you, or a health benefit that might affect you. Interesting. You're not the only one, Ravi, to have described the importance of cost-benefit analysis in relationship to technology assessment. They seem to be going hand in hand for many people. But I wanted to go beyond now India or beyond just Australia and ask you about what you think about joint technology assessment, especially in the vein that perhaps outside health or climate change, the environment, not much technology assessment has happened for emerging tech. And now we're sort of saying not only do we want countries and industries and consortia to be involved in technology assessment and everyday citizens and representative groups, but we also want countries to talk to one another. Do you see that this is possible if I say joint TIA or joint TA?
Now, joint EA is possible provided you are able to really identify two things. One, institutions with the capacity. Two, comparative analysis of two possible or two potential technologies. I'll give you an example.
Hmm.
Since you are talking of India, Australia, of course you can also count me in. A joint TIA between India and Australia is possible if we take into account digital health. Because digital health is something that is very common to both countries. I am part of a DFAT funded project which looks at AI in health. Of course, the project is almost coming to an end now. We are winding up in maybe in a month or two. So what we did, we went to Australia. We had discussions with a whole lot of stakeholders, including government agencies, private sector, then some of the people who are developing this, and also some of the startups, some of the people who are doing real clinical work there,
Yes.
including indigenous community, people who are disabled, representing disabled communities.
Mm-hmm.
Brought a team from there both Delhi and Bangalore. We had 10 days of discussion with different stakeholders. Although what we did was not a typical TIA, we tried to understand how in both countries the response for AI in health is there as much as it pertains to the needs of the disabled population
Yes.
or the vulnerable disabled population. Like that, we can definitely do a TIA, a joint TIA, provided we pick up the right technology, identify the right stakeholders, and then offer a broader platforms to engage in. That will be possible the moment we crystallize our focus and attention on a technology that is well developed in both countries, where people are aware of it, people have been practicing it, and then there are enough stakeholders to engage with. So joint AI is possible. In fact, it is doable. And more importantly, when we do joint AI, in some of the emerging technologies, it will be something that is very unique, which has not been done before. Because often TIA is more country specific, country focused, or technology specific, or location focused. So when we do comparative analysis, we can, for example, we can do one thing, very simple thing, which we are doing in the AI,
Yes.
like how the different countries or two different countries are looking at the regulatory perspective. What we found, what is interesting is that, of course, you know it well. I need not say this to you. In Australia, while there is a federal government that is showing enormous interest, some states are taking much more interest in AI and health. Now, on their own, they are doing a whole lot of things. Of course, there are a lot of overlaps, gaps in regulation and governance. Whereas some of the states have their own commission, they have their own experts body to advise them in use of AI in health. Whereas there is a national, larger level national initiatives also happening. So if we compare a similar things happening in India or in Australia, or for that matter Australia and Japan, lot of things will be clearer to us. And then comparative analysis will also help us to identify how institutions mean respond to different technologies, how institutions respond to different trends in technologies, which ones get prioritized, which ones get regulated well, which ones are not getting regulated, or which ones are not, in the sense that are not considered important enough to be regulated or to be decided later. Fantastic thing we can do. Need to identify a quick technology well developed, identify the stakeholders, then it's deployable.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the main stumbling blocks or hindrances or challenges? Is it funding? Is it setting up an institutional body that is recognized at a governmental level, at the federal or state level, provincial level? What is it? What are the hindrances? Is it funding or is it understanding? What
For
is it in
what?
your eyes for the introduction of large scale technology assessment everywhere, not just in India but elsewhere? What do you think are the stumbling blocks and the
No, no, no.
hindrances?
I think the fundamental stumbling block is that the very idea of TA itself is quite new. People are not aware of. That is the major stumbling block
Okay.
because people do not see the need for it.
Mm-hmm.
So unless people see the need for it, unless people see that there is something called TA or TAA which can really benefit, people do not see the need for it. Why? Because lot of things which happen in terms of traditional cost benefit analysis, in terms of environmental impact analysis, are necessary, but they are not substitutes for TA.
Got it.
Unfortunately, what has happened is that lot of emphasis which goes in terms of cost benefit analysis for economics, economic perspective, or on the return of investment perspective. whereas the environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment are getting a lot of importance because of the developments of the last few decades where pressure groups have been there, environmental groups have been very active, indigenous groups have been very active, so societal based groups have been very active. So though they have the stakeholders, the government have to engage with. I mean, so that they got became part and parcel of the regulatory or the structure in which any technology or any project is being assessed. Whereas TA doesn't have any pressure group or any group that would go and advocate for. And then the community is again very limited, very fragmented. And
Yes.
again, it stands somewhere between neither a fully technocratic, neither a science based, engineering technology based, nor a fully social science based. It is somewhere in between where more people from the social sciences talk, less people from the technology side talk. So this is the major hindrance. Second problem, which I think is that we need to have some good use case studies which will demonstrate that TA is beneficial, it is important, it can deliver results. We do not have many case studies in many countries. Although in Europe, yes, Europe, there are some very good reports. Parliamentary technology assessment has happened. In Netherlands, lot of much work has been done in terms of CTA and PTA, but not in other countries. But again, in Europe, the problem is Europe may do many things on their own. So there is a huge divide between what Europe does, what is happening in Europe, and what is happening in Asia, and what is happening in America. So there
Yeah.
is no cross cultural or cross communication over there. So
Mm,
TA groups working in Europe are doing fantastic, but no impact in India, no impact in Japan, no impact in USA.
mm. Fascinating, Ravi. I mean, I could talk to you all evening Australia time here, but I wanted to go to the end of the interview as we're coming up to the hour now and ask you if there's anything else you wish to add to this discussion
No,
that we
nothing
didn't
much, nothing
cover.
much. What I want to say is that what exactly are you planning from these projects? In the sense that you want to build upon them, upon on these projects, or you mean you want to complete them and then move on to something else, or is there in the larger idea of taking up something bigger in terms of TIA as part of this, as an outcome of this, or is it going to be project from to project?
Always research being sustainable is the key to most countries, and I think this is, we've all been dabbling in smaller projects for many, many years, decades,
Yeah,
just like yourself. But we hope in the longer term to build a community of practice that's self-sustaining. Of course, that will take more funding. We're already looking for avenues for more funding to incorporate the voices that we've come into contact with through the webinars. It's been hundreds and hundreds of people already, the roundtables themselves, as you know, you participated, and as a speaker and so forth. We're trying to build community that we hope will continue to garner funding from many different diverse sources. And although, we don't think about standards per se at the moment, that would come a long way. In
yeah,
providing some kind of benchmark. I spoke to Dr. Moki earlier today, Abu Bakar from Uganda, and he constantly was encouraging this notion of benchmarks and guidelines and having rules of engagement when we came together with different stakeholders from different countries to say this is, the grounds that we are doing a technology assessment on, and we need to move forward in this way. And he described stages, but we don't know. This will evolve over time, but I think there has been a recent resurgence, particularly in the context of peace and stability. And unfortunately, we've seen the world with so many different conflicts. We're not saying that this project will resolve the conflicts, but technology is at the heart of some of
yeah,
these conflicts, whether it's the discussions around autonomous weapons, whether it's discussions on quantum or nuclear or cybersecurity attacks, uh, and AI. It's escalating. We've had warnings from, even the godfather of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, most
yeah, yeah, yeah,
recently, talking
yeah,
about where this might go with regards to surveillance and cybersecurity breaches. There
yeah,
are known things. The thing is, how will we explore them together towards peace and stability, in a way that technology can be used in a beneficial way, like the things that you were talking about, are really important to me personally. This notion of a sustainable environment through biotechnologies, right, towards something that means we're not going to destroy the earth we live on and have it sustainable into the longer term. So I think a longer term view of technology assessment is important, and we've inserted the word impact, though many different assessment types have the word impact embedded in them. Child's rights impact assessment, fundamental rights impact assessment, privacy impact assessment. These assessments have the word impact, but what are the consequences? And we can't know for sure, but we can with some. You know, for me, studying technology for the last 25, 30 years, I always say we can see the signs or we can anticipate consequences before a technology has diffused widespread in the society. We can see them in blueprints. We can see them in patents. We can see them if we are aware of the early warning signs of how these technologies could potentially be misused. Uh, and then there's the question of offensive or defensive. Who owns the tech, and then we call it good tech or bad tech, depending on who owns it and who's got the power, right? Who's got the power of that technology? But certainly the convergence will muddy the waters, as we both said earlier today in our interview. And I think TIA is important in at least acknowledging early on. For Abu Bakr, for example, Dr. Moki, he was talking about, okay, if we start to see unintended consequences at stage two or phase two, as he called it, we don't say get rid of the technology altogether. He said we start to self-correct. We start to come and bring, and I think it's hard to do that, but I think he's right. If we can provide some kind of risk register which says this risk is a threat to the world or to our society locally, if we can address the risk, we can make it tolerable and move on. But these are all the complexities, and the notion of risk registers is something where we're thinking about, as we've already seen in standards to do with the digital design of children's digital services. So I think that's where we're headed. Hopefully, it's long term. I don't like the notion of, these small grants. Small, this wasn't small. This was quite large and generous from DFAT and India, but we'd rather look at a long-term view. But of course, that requires many people working together for a sustained period of time who believe in this project, and it also requires funding from diverse sources. So, with that, Ravi, I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for
My
your
pleasure.
brains, Ravi. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
your
We'll be in
passion.
touch. We'll be in touch. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye, my friend.